Hey, welcome to the Everyday Preparedness Podcast. We're back with another episode. My name's Zan, and Brent's with us again today. Brent, how's it going?
Oh, not too bad. I'm going to warn everybody right now. I'm a little bit under the weather, so if it sounds like I have a cough drop in my mouth, it's because I do. So you'll have to excuse, if you would, please, any weird sound like in my voice or coughing and hacking and sniffling and such.
Yeah, it just shows you how dedicated we are to bring you guys this show with as much preparedness info as we can, even when we're sick. So today we're going to start a going back to the basics type setup. And today we're going to start out with food storage, which we're not going to do these in order of most important to least important because they're all the same. They're all must-haves. And food, we can't live without food, obviously. Food storage is very important for several different reasons. Okay, so we'll get into it. Why do you need to do it? Well, food storage has been, it used to not be an uncommon thing. People, as far back as I can remember, it used to be even more normal further back, but even when I was a kid and my grandparents would always have, canned goods or home canned jars sitting around. And it was just something you did. You didn't think about it. And nowadays, people find out you're storing food and they think you're some weird doomsday prepper. So, Brent, you got anything to add on that?
No, I remember growing up, my parents always had a real big garden, which I know we're going to talk about later. I remember as a kid, we'd go out. We'd spend an entire weekend, seemed like, just constantly outside gathering, different vegetables and stuff like that and preparing. I remember, mom and dad always canned in the house.
Yep.
And, oh man, it would end up so hot in there.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you're standing outside in the middle of summer to cool off. it was just something we did. At that time, I'm not even that old. I just turned 32. That's really not that old. It's something that's kind of fallen out of character for the most part anymore. But even, just 20 years ago, it was something that was very normal.
Yeah, and I think that carried over from that being normal when our grandparents or our parents were kids, because that was even more of the norm back then. And I think the reason that people do it is survival. You got to eat. That's all there is to it. And finding things and ways to store food long term assures you that you're going to have food in bad situations for, we'll get into that in a minute, some different scenarios on what could cause food shortages.
Well, you got to think it's a little bit different mindset we have now today. We have a very, you can go to Walmart. Most people are within 10 or 15 minutes of a Walmart. And, so we don't think, oh man, I may run out of food. Like they did. Most of our grandparents, they would have lived shortly after or during, the stock market crash in the 30s. Mm-hmm. And they would have known literally what it was like to have nothing. And
go ahead.
So,
sorry.
They learn, you're good. They learned to, make the most of what they had, and that was what it was about. And it was strictly for survival because, when they grew up, you didn't always have stuff. And, I remember talking to my dad, and they didn't even have indoor plumbing for the first few years that, he was alive. So you had to can, you had to, grow crops and stuff like that, and it's a totally different mindset. They knew what it was like to go without, and they knew how to make sure they didn't.
Yeah, you actually brought up the idea that I was thinking about earlier that I couldn't remember right off, was that the mindset, people walk into these grocery stores, and it could be, it could be a small market, or it could be a giant Walmart or a Price Cutter or any kind, Sam's, Costco, any of these places, and they see just walls of food and anything you would need to prepare food, water, all of these things, and they just think that it's an endless supply. But that stuff can dry up really fast. What is it? Do you remember the statistic on that? You mentioned it in a previous show, but I can't remember right offhand.
If I remember right, it is basically that there is roughly 3 meals worth of food. It's either 3 meals or 3 days. Either way, that's something kind of wild to think about, of food on the supermarket shelves.
Yeah, and let's just go ahead and get into some reasons on why you should prepare. And that's one thing right there is food shortages. Was few months ago, maybe a year. I don't know. I can't remember the exact time. There was talk of trucker strikes,
Yep.
and if the truckers shut down, nothing gets delivered. Therefore, groceries don't get delivered. Pet food doesn't get delivered. Water is not going to get delivered. So there's a prime reason. Weather, that's the most common reason. I mean, come on, we've talked about it before. Ice storm hits, tornado is possibly coming, deep snow, the heat even, if it's going to be I guess, was it brownout, I guess is what it's called.
Right.
All people rush to the stores, they buy up the water, they buy up the milk, eggs, bread, which those are three things I would not be buying if I was storing food anyway. But people buy up and then they start fighting and they start price gouging and it's just a mess. So if you've got your food prepped and stored ahead of time, that's something you don't have to worry about. Do you want to add one real quick before I go on?
Just something very, very simple, and it's one that I found here not too long ago that came in very handy to myself. Maybe you need to save money for a bill.
Great.
And I know that sounds weird.
Yeah, that's a really great point.
To me, that's not what I think of when I think of, preparedness and food storage and all that. But we got in a situation where we literally didn't have the money to pay a couple bills that were very necessary and, go do our weekly grocery shopping. Now, thankfully, I've been preparing a little bit along now for a couple years, and I had food there. Now, it wasn't necessarily, filet mignon and,
right, yeah.
But, we ate well. I didn't go hungry. My belly was full. I was satisfied. It was good. And I didn't have to sweat it. And that's, to me, that was a big, big deal.
That's actually that will transition well into what I was going to mention. I've actually done what you just said before. It's not so much been to maybe, like, once you start storing food, no matter what kind it is, we'll get into that in a little bit, you start, like, that becomes just what you do. And grocery shopping, and you can speak, I may be speaking for myself, but it seems like grocery shopping, it's kind of secondary, if not none. Like, I just maybe go when I need an item here or there. Otherwise, you start relying on your food storage for, like you said, there's been times where I didn't go to the grocery store for 3 weeks because I just had so many, with the exception of fresh food, if I couldn't grow it myself during the seasons or whatever, I would just eat whatever I had in the pantry. And I'll use that, like I said, to transition to my next thing, and that has to do with job loss or job transition. That's, if you were to lose your job, people are so dependent. They live paycheck to paycheck. Even if they're not in debt, they rely on their paycheck to survive. And if you've got your food stored up and something happens to your job, be it your fault, not your fault, whatever, or maybe your husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, parents, whoever, if somebody's check is not coming in anymore, then that's one less thing you've got to stress out about because your food is there, so you don't have to worry about that. Let's look at something else to focus on. And it goes into job transition as well. I transitioned jobs a few months ago, and I had an issue where I didn't have any money. I didn't have any way to get money out of an account for a while that my new money was being deposited into. So, I wasn't getting paid. I mean, the money was there, but I essentially had no access to the money for about a month. So that's another situation where I relied on my food storage. I had enough to get me through then, and then when I started getting paid, I just started replenishing what I had out of my pantry. So what do you got to say on job loss transition?
Well, I was going to say a very real example right now is look at the price of oil.
Yeah.
Every one of us that drives a pickup is absolutely celebrating right now.
I think everybody is, regardless.
Oh, yeah. It's just, when you get 14, 15 miles a gallon,
yeah.
You're very happy when the price is under $2. And I even saw, I think somewhere around here was like, what, $1.64 or something?
Yeah, something like that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
We think of, oh, that's great, it's wonderful, all this, nice cheap gas again. But you got to think, all those people that work on the oil rigs, like in Oklahoma, North Dakota, and all that, this is killing them.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is, what happens with booms and busts. And, that's kind of, I don't want to, sit here and predict that oil's going to bust and, all that. but this is hurting them. I know people that work in the oil fields currently, and some of them are cutting their staffs in half. You may go from having a six-figure a year job to no job in a hurry in times like this. And I mean, I know a lot of people were thinking, oh, six figures job, oh yeah, they could prepare. Well, can, should, woulda, coulda, but either way, we've seen a major company in this area just close up shop. And one telling example I thought was actually it's kind of funny, but at the same time it's kind of sad for the people that work there. There was a fast food restaurant that the owner came in at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon and said, yeah, we need to get everything cleaned in the next hour. Everybody's fired, and we're closing up shop forever.
Wow.
And he literally closed the doors at 5 o'clock. He did not tell any of them until an hour before he locked the doors what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you've got people that, like you said, they live paycheck to paycheck. All of a sudden, your boss comes in one day and, hey, guess what? In an hour, you don't have a job.
Right.
I mean, most of those people will be able to go get unemployment and all that stuff, but still, unemployment doesn't last forever either.
Right. And again, with the, if that happens, your food is taken care of, worry about something else,
Yep.
That's the whole idea of preparedness. The more you're prepared, the less you got to worry about when times get tough. So I'll transition into that. We're talking about booms and busts, and I honestly think food storage is one of the best investments you can make, period. People, you got to have food. There are also others to it. You got to have, that's one of our 4 core preparedness niches, I guess, whatever. I need to get a good word for that.
It's part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I wasn't thinking of, but that's an even better, So as far as finances go, people think, oh, I need to save money, I need to spend less, I need to invest in the stock market, I need to, buy CDs or, invest in this company or buy into small bit. There's all different kinds of things you can come up with. But, I mean, really, if you stop and look at it, even you're talking about gas going up and down. We've seen different, electronics. I mean, I remember, it's a little off subject, but I remember a long time ago when the SD cards first came out and MP3 players first came out, and I bought a 1 gig SD card at Best Buy, and it was like $160 because they first came out there, and there was and now you can't even find a 1 gig card. You might be able to find one on eBay for a couple bucks.
Right.
So, General Electronics, that's something that keeps, they go up, but it also goes down quicker. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. I mean, have you seen I don't know how much you keep up. Sorry, this is total kind of side tangent. I don't know how much you keep up with, like, the game shows and stuff, like the video game shows like CES and E3 and all.
Not much. I mean, a little bit, but not as much as I used to.
There was a website that I went to, and they were literally eating printed pizza.
Wow.
It was a 3D printer that could actually print food.
That's crazy.
And they're going to be coming out within this year for about $2,000 a printer. I mean, you could sit at home and, hey, I want some sugar cookies. Let's go print them out. You get on your computer and, Star Trek moment,
That's just, I'm kind of speechless. I don't know what to say to that.
Well, right, but I mean, look at, like what you just said, you paid $100 and some for a 1 gig SD card, and now $2,000 can buy you a food printer.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just wild.
And that's a much better investment, by the way.
Well, yeah, who needs food storage, right? Whenever you can just print it.
Print it, but hey, you got to rely on the internet, you got to rely on electricity and all that stuff. So,
yep.
General food storage is still the best thing, but. Back to what we were still talking about, that all these things going up and down, and movie tickets are way more expensive compared to what they used to. Just inflation in general is crazy. And the one thing that goes up, it seems like up, and never goes back down, is food. I mean, come on, look at the price of a 20-ounce soda or a candy bar or a package of gum. I mean, you're talking $2, $3, $4 for some of these things. And, but I remember buying that stuff for a quarter, 50 cents, and I've never seen it go back down to even like a sale price. You still don't see a lot of that stuff that cheap. So, I think stocking up on your food, it's something you need. you can invest in stock market, which may crash, it may not, and you may make $1 million, but that money is not going to be available to you immediately in your pantry. You know what I'm saying? So, what is yours is only what you physically have. You know what I mean? So, what do you have to say on the financial aspect of food storage?
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, you're talking about, investing in the stock market and this and that. You always hear people, especially in kind of the prepper area, I say especially, a lot of times in some of the prepper areas and stuff, that, oh, you need to invest in gold and silver and precious metals. And
yeah.
And I mean, yeah, technically, yeah, if you had gold, you could sell it, buy food, yada, yada, yada. But if you can't leave the house, who knows what type of situation you find yourself in. Like one guy told it to me, which is worth more whenever you're starving, the Mona Lisa or its weight in bread?
Right.
I'm sorry, if I'm starving, this fine piece of art doesn't mean a whole lot to me.
Well, and then you've got to find somebody to actually pay you for it. And
right.
What if they're starving?
Right. And whenever you could just have the food and not have to worry about it. I mean, and even, you mentioned it as an investment, and it is for the most part, but it's also something that you always have. Once you buy it, it's yours, you have it. You may pay a little, high price for it. I know some of the prices of meats and stuff have gone crazy, and eventually some of that will have to come down just a little bit, especially like beef. You have it. It's yours. You can eat it. You can help other people. So I mean, I think it's a great investment all the way around as well. So
yeah, it's one thing that's really, unless the food actually goes bad, which we'll get into what you do and don't buy as far as food storage goes and preparing it, but it's something that's not going to go bad. Your electronics can give out. Your car depreciates as soon as you drive it off the lot. Your house can depreciate unless you improve it. Pretty much anything you buy just devalues itself over time. But food is never going to lose that value. In fact, it's going to just continue to gain value. So,
yep.
We'll move into what you can do. How do you start? Where do you start? What do you buy? And the easiest way I can say is that next time you're at the grocery store, start out with just a few canned goods. Buy some whatever you like. Only store what you're going to eat. There's no reason to buy anything that you don't like. What's the point? A lot of people in preparedness field will say you can barter or anything like that. But again, I'm looking out for myself, my family, anybody directly around me. What do they like? I'm not worried about,
Right.
So, start out with some canned goods. Very inexpensive. There's, you can get the good, and I'm not saying to buy cheap stuff either. You can if you want, but you can buy good stuff for $1.50, $2 a can. That's really not that bad. Buy 2 or 3 cans every time you go to the grocery store, and then just start picking up an extra, adding one to it every single time. And you can find, rice, beans. Those are, the dry ones, even instant. Those will store really well for a long time, and they're very inexpensive. So, what's some other really basic inexpensive items you can think of?
Well, I'm with you on the canned goods, and especially check around any of your big food holidays and like your Walmarts and stuff. Especially, I know Walmarts around here do. They'll put out the 4-packs for like $2 or something.
Yeah.
I mean, that's great. Yeah, you may need to cook 2 for Thanksgiving or whatever, but go ahead and buy 2 4-packs. There's 8 of them. I mean, it's like $4 or $5.
Mm-hmm.
And stuff like that. Flour is a good thing to have around. It's a little bit higher, but it's not outrageous. I don't know if you wanted to get into actually how to store it.
Sure.
But if you're gonna get like the dry goods, like the beans and rice and stuff like that, make sure you have good containers that no critters can get in.
Right.
Because I don't care, how well you keep the house clean. There's gonna be something that goes after your food eventually. And if you have just like bags and stuff lying around, it's real easy. And even not even critters necessarily, but you drop something in the pantry, tears the bag open, there you go. So
as far as as far as the dry grains and flour and stuff like that, bugs, that's the worst thing. Even if you've got the bag sealed, somehow they'll get bugs in them.
Yeah. Well, and they said I was always told I have not 100% verified this through the internet or anything, but I tend to listen to what some of the old timers always tell me, especially on like flour. They say throw it in a deep freeze
Yep,
for at least like I think it's 48 hours. I store mine in the deep freeze.
me too.
I mean, I just leave it there. And
One of the reasons, another thing that you're not even thinking about by doing that, not only is it killing those or keeping them out, but it's also saving more room in your pantry for other things.
yep.
So moving on, we'll go kind of to I guess maybe the next step up maybe, and that would be canning your own food and growing your own food. It's a lot more time consuming, and you might you can buy seeds pretty cheap, but then you got to rely on the food to actually and know how to plant the food and know how to can. That's the gardening and canning. Those are two skills in themselves. You can find all the necessity stuff you need to do that with online, how-tos and tutorials, all that stuff. And that's the next step. And that's obviously that stuff is going to taste much better because it's homegrown. What do you have to say about the canning aspect and growing?
I think it's something that everybody needs to know how to do. Whether, some people may find themselves in a more urban environment where it's really hard to grow, a whole lot of vegetables. Although, honestly, if you start looking online, and I'll try to share some links to some of this stuff on the Facebook page, but there's ways for urban people to garden and everything and still have some good fresh produce and raise their own and even can their own. But
I
it's
know a lot of people will just grow very small beds, maybe a 1 by 1 foot of something off of a balcony, even if you live in an apartment. So, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, if you can get like 5 gallon buckets and everything, poke some holes in the bottom of it for where it can drain and everything, and you can grow a lot of food in just a handful of buckets if you do it right and pick the right types of items. But no, it's something that, it's kind of a lost art anymore, at least in my experience, canning.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something that you can store it as long as you remember to store it in a cool, dry place. You want to keep light out. That stuff will last for a year or so, and it is so much better than the canned stuff you buy. And gardening's good. It's good exercise. It's something good to keep you up, moving, going, active. And, push comes to shove, if you know how to garden, you can at least eat. So.
Well, and it saves a lot of money, too. I'm the most, cheapskate person there is. And like I said on previous shows, last year we did our first 12 by 12 bed of lettuce. It was $1.20 for the seeds, and we ate lettuce for 2 months. Salads, different kinds of salads almost every night. And, it might get old at some point, and it might not be the best thing in the world, but, money in my pocket and saving, stocking up on food or, spending my money elsewhere is more important to me than eating out, whatever I feel like every single night. So, canning, it is a lost art, like you said, and I think that goes back to people just like, why do you need a can when I can go get food down the street at McDonald's or grocery store or whatever? Why should I waste time? And it's just a different mindset. So we've got basic dry goods, canned goods, canning.
Something else, if I can add real quick,
Sure.
it kind of goes along with like gardening and everything. It's just a little bit different. Knowing how to hunt and process game. That is something that most people. There's millions of hunters, and God bless them. I absolutely love them. But there's a lot of people in this world that get very squeamish whenever it comes to actually processing the game.
Mm-hmm.
But knowing how to do that and take care of it is very, very important because you can't always grow a garden. Now, if you can, you'll have food for the winter and stuff, of course. But like you said, people get tired of lettuce and stuff, and you can go out and you can shoot, squirrels and deer and legally. That's something that if you know how to do and you can process it yourself, you don't have to take it and spend what I think is exorbitant cost to process it.
Yeah, that's processing. That's actually what I was going to move in next is, the next step up from canning would be freeze drying or dehydrating. Now, we sell the dehydrated food or the freeze dried food, and you can find it a lot of places. It is expensive, but this stuff's going to last you, not two things. This stuff's going to last you 20, 25 years sealed, number one. Number two, they've got some really, really good stuff that they're starting to put in these. Gourmet food, lasagna, chicken Alfredo. They've got desserts. They've got drinks, and the stuff is really good. It's not just potatoes. It's not just potatoes or green beans canned. It's actually stuff you could just you'd love. You'd eat any night of the week, and it's easier to prepare too. Just boil some water and pour it in there. But it is more expensive, so that's why we're kind of pushing this stuff towards the end, because this is once you get the basics stocked up, then you can start moving into this. They do sell obviously dehydrators are pretty affordable for most people, and you can dehydrate meat. Your game you were just talking about. I mean, come on, who doesn't do deer jerky all the time every year?
Oh, for real, man.
So you can do that. You can do chicken. You can do beef. You can throw your vegetables in there that you've grown in the garden, fruits, herbs, spices. You can do all that stuff in a dehydrator, and those are really inexpensive. And then what you can do is take that food from the dehydrator, and then you can buy a vacuum sealer, which they're also not too expensive, and seal that stuff up. Then you can throw it in the freezer, throw it in a bucket, sealed bucket, and that's just another way to preserve your fresh food. They also make the freeze dryers for consumer use. They're a lot more expensive. I don't see myself ever getting one. They're just way too far out of my price range. So what do you have to add on just the basics of dehydrating and freeze drying?
I don't do a whole lot of dehydrating. As you said, I do, however, love when people feel the need to share their deer jerky with me.
Yep.
That and summer sausage, man.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I just sit there and devour that stuff. I store up a lot of the freeze-dried stuff and the dehydrated foods and everything because it does last for a while. It is quite a bit more expensive, and I would, like you said, it's something that you put on after your canned goods and stuff like that. But something you might look into, and I'll see if I can't find a link and put it on the Facebook page again. There are places where you can go and they will actually do that for you. I want to say it seems like there's one in Missouri. I don't remember where. It seems like it's up towards Kansas City. And I'm not exactly sure on the process, but it's like you basically go and I don't know if you have your own cans or what, but you can actually go and fill up your own kind of freeze-dried stuff. So instead of buying through us or whatever, you can load up your own stuff and go. And like I said, it's a little bit high. If you're looking at maybe doing your own type freeze drying and stuff, that might be a better option. So
yeah, about the dehydrating, going back a little bit, I dehydrate stuff. Well, I haven't for a few weeks, but there for a while, I was dehydrating fruit every single week. Every weekend on my days off, I would be dehydrating bananas, apples, pineapple, oranges, anything I had, especially if it was about to go bad. That's kind of when you want to start dehydrating it. But I love dried fruit, and it'll last a long time. I don't know that this is recommended, but a lot of that stuff I dehydrated and then just put into mason jars. I didn't vacuum seal them or anything, and some of them it's been 2 months, 3 months, and you look in there and they're still. I tried one the other day. They taste just as good. There's nothing growing on them, and that was something very basic. That took one afternoon to get about 3-4 mason jars full of apples. So that's pretty basic. And then going back to the freeze-dried stuff, I'm looking at right now on our store, we've got a 72-hour kit, which has got the food and water and fire starter in it for $109.99. We've got 56-serving breakfast entrees for $116.99. Those are two things that you can just, once you get your basics, your soups, and your dry goods, and then maybe you want to start canning, buy one of these every so often. That's what I do. I mean, none of us can afford to buy this stuff all the time, and nor would I recommend it because you don't want to eat this stuff all the time, but you could if you have to, and that's what it's for. So buy one of the, one a year. Even that. Do you think that's a good way to go about it?
Yeah. I mean, if that's my personal philosophy on it is, I want to have up to 1 year's worth of food. Where if I lost my job, had no money to buy food, or whatever situation I found myself in, I would have food for 1 year.
Right.
Obviously, I can't spend $3,000 to go buy the 1 year thing.
And even if you could, I don't recommend it. to be honest.
No, I mean, unless you've just got, so much money you don't know what to do with all of it, then by all means. But it's one of those, no, I think you do it slow. It's a step process. It's not, you don't want to go nuts with any of it. And like I said, you buy one, I would like to think, maybe one or two a year.
Yeah, 2 is probably a better number.
But, I mean, there again, honestly, it's, yeah, we sell the stuff, and I'll sell you however many you guys want to buy that I can get in. I'll sell them. But at the same time, realistically speaking, it's really expensive compared to the other options. And whenever you can go to the grocery store and buy that stuff, but there again, those grocery store cans, they get dinged, and they only last for a couple years, where a lot of the stuff that we sell online will last for up to 25. So it's always nice to have that stuff. But yeah, I think 3 a year.
You kind of have, by going about it like you said, you kind of have, I guess, different levels of shelf life. Yep. And you're not spending a fortune either. Like I said, you can buy. We've got these for, around 110, 115 for a couple of the different cheaper ones that I just listed. And yeah, that is a lot. But I mean, let's think about it. Let's say you play video games. That's what, 2 brand new video games you could not buy in a 6-month period.
Right.
Or you could. There's just all different kinds of little things. You could not go out to eat like 3 or 4 times, and that would pay for that within 6 months. So
yeah, most of those are about a week's worth of food, I think, for a person, or somewhere around that neighborhood.
And when you think about that, that's even cheaper. I mean, if you go out to a nice, even just 2 people, if you go out to like a nice restaurant, it's like $30-$40 a person, and that's for 1 meal.
Yep. So
you're looking at like the cost of 3 or 4 meals of eating out would feed you for almost a week, 2
right.
people on this. So, that's just, it's all about perspective and how you're looking at things. So I think that's about it for the food storage. We've gone over how to do it, why you do it, what you can, what you shouldn't. And there's nothing else to do now but get started. We've given you pretty much all the base information you need. Hopefully we'll have some more articles or further podcasts on this down the road. The best thing I can tell you is do research on the internet, find ways to do it, and don't, whatever you do, just don't get sucked into the doomsday prepper. I know we refer to that because it's kind of a joke, but the doomsday prepper preparedness mindset, where you need 16 pallets worth of freeze-dried food. You don't. I mean, just start out small. I started out small. I did not go out and buy a bunch of these buckets. I started out with canned goods, moved on to the dry stuff, started growing my own, and then started buying the freeze-dried. So
yeah,
that's what I would recommend doing. It's the cheapest way to do it. It's the most efficient way to do it, and it's the best way to learn skills and learn managing through the process. So what do you have to add before we finish out the show?
I think the best way to do it, my personal opinion, is to learn how to garden and can your own. I think that's honestly, that's the way to go for really kind of long-term stuff. I don't mean long-term like, the government's collapsed and no lights for, 36 years.
You're just talking long-term longevity of living life.
Yeah. And so, but, I know a lot of people can't do that. And it literally starts as simple as, you make your list, and I'm going to buy 2 cans of corn, 2 cans of green beans, and a can of peas. Well, add 1. Just add 1. That's all you have to do. Something else to remember, whenever you do start setting up food storage, also establish a rotation process. I found myself, I didn't keep up on the rotation process I had, and I noticed we were eating some of our stuff that was, brand new that we had bought just, a couple weeks ago. And I asked the wife, I was like, hey, are we out of this? Is this all we have left? Oh, no, there's a whole lot in the back. I started looking. Some of it was, a couple years old. And, like I said, I fell behind on it. But that's something that, whenever you're preparing for emergencies and stuff like that, you really need to be sure to keep up on. Because, the last thing you need is to get, get sick or something off your food, storage.
Right, yeah.
So, whenever you do start setting it up, try to set it up in a way that you can also kind of rotate it. I mean, I know it kind of sounds like it may be a lot of work, but it's really not. It's just set up a way where you can add the new stuff in the back.
Yeah, and start small. Like you said, it does seem like it's a lot of work, and preparedness we've talked about before, it can be overwhelming. I was overwhelmed when I first started. I was like, oh, I got to do this and this and this and this. Don't. Just pick one thing. And like you said, one can. Start with one can.
Yep.
And find a place to store it. Another thing you can do too is storage. I don't know if you do this, but I do it a little bit. Is keeping your food storage kind of spread out throughout the house. Do you do that?
A little bit, not for any particular purpose that I'm consciously aware of.
The reason I do it is because of fires and tornadoes. Because
That's good.
there might be a section of the house, and I'm not saying you got to cut holes in your mattresses and stuff pieces of cheese in there. No, I'll just take I was selling stuff on eBay, getting rid of crap I don't need, and it freed up a couple of small empty plastic tubs. So I'd throw a box of Cliff Bars in there. I'd throw a couple cans in there, a couple bottles of water. That's a couple days worth of food. Throw it in the closet, and just rotate it. Seems like it's just an extra step you can do. It's not necessary, but you'll find all these little ideas. The further you get into it, you'll find all these little ideas that you start doing, and there's not kind of one size fits all type mindset to food storage. It can be different for everybody. So with that, we'll close out the show. We'll come back next time with another primary preparedness thing. We'll probably do water next time. Probably should have done that today, but
Water's kind of important. So
yeah, we'll do water next time. Water storage, different ways to purify water. So I'll give you something to look forward to. So with that, have a good one. Keep preparing.
stay safe.